We moved to Liverpool about 14 years ago, and we left Buckinghamshire, lovely, leafy, small countryside town of Amersham, and we moved to the city. It's resonated with me as I've thought about this verse in John's Gospel. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood. John 1, incredible theology in John 1. And essentially, it's about all sorts of stuff. It's about who Jesus is and what he brings, and it's about his eternal nature as well as his physical human nature. It's about his divine nature. There's a lot there. But I want us to think about that verse. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood. So we move into the neighbourhood, and we leave our lovely, comfy countryside home, and our friends in the beautiful south, they say things to us like, "What are you going there for?" And "Liverpool, danger," that kind of stuff. And of course, we were bored in comfortable conformity in middle class south. We wanted more of God, and if you want more of God, you need to move. He's already moved. You need to move with him. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood. So we moved into the neighbourhood. Now I know we live in the leafy posh bit of Garston, but in our first few years we had a couple of cars stolen, the same motorbike stolen 3 times. We had a lad stabbed at the bottom of our street, drug deal gone wrong. We often see the scientific police van that gives you the indication that someone's been burgled in the neighbourhood. You live in the neighbourhood. You might not live in mine, but the neighbourhood you live in, it is a neighbourhood, isn't it? You've got neighbours. There's challenge, there's difficulty. One of the things that John tells us in John's Gospel is about the glory of Jesus. We have seen his glory, he says, and he uses the word doxa, glory, and he also uses the word for tabernacles, for moving into the neighbourhood, and that gives us an impression of who Jesus is. He wants us to grab hold of the fact that Jesus is God in human form, and that he moves into our neighbourhood, which enables us to move into other neighbourhoods. The idea of John is this, that in fact a lot of scholars think that he'd written the Gospel already, maybe even the Gospel had gone out, and he adds the intro. He adds these verses 18 and 19 verses, because before you see what Jesus does, he wants you to know who Jesus is, and that's vitally important for us today as Christians. You might be having a terrible time. You might have had the worst year ever, and that's quite possible, isn't it? In 2021, 2021, awful stuff has gone on. Worst year ever, and it's important that we know who Jesus is before ever we see what Jesus does, because he is the glory of God. He is the presence of God in reality in our world. His feet touch the ground. He doesn't just hover above them. He moves into the mess, into the challenges of work, of uni, of school, into the people who hate you, who are horrible to you, say awful things about you. The idea that Christianity is all victory is obviously nonsense. In fact, that glory word, doxa, appears throughout John's Gospel, mostly to do with the crucifixion. So mostly to do with death, that we see glory in or possibly in this case better, sacrifice. We see glory in sacrifice. Am I glad that we left Amersham and moved to Liverpool? Every day. Has it worked out well? I think it has, for the most part. Has there been tough days in those 14 years? Of course there has. There's been some tough weeks. There's been some dreadful months. There's been some pretty difficult years. And yet we have followed Jesus, and you need to do the same today. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood.